After the second handprint showed up on the porch, the one with my name carved into the center, I didn't sleep more than a few minutes at a time. Every time Wilson's ears twitched, I woke up. Every time a floorboard popped, I sat upright. And every time the woods outside shifted even slightly, I felt as though something was pressing its forehead against the glass, waiting. The rules weren't suggestions, they weren't superstition. They were the only barrier between me and whatever was out there. But the second night in that cabin taught me something worse. Even when I followed the rules, the woods didn't have to. The sun crawled up late and pale that morning, filtering through bare branches like a dying bulb. Cold stiffened the ground, and the sky looked like it was preparing for a fight it already knew it would lose. I set a pot of water to boil on the wood stove, trying to warm the place up, trying to pretend that a night like the one before could be followed by a normal morning. Wilson sat by the door, staring out the window, ears high and rigid. He hadn't moved since sunrise. When I whispered for him to come eat, he didn't respond. He didn't even flick his tail. The low, uneasy sound he made in his throat was the first sign that something was wrong. That's when I noticed the woods. They were too quiet again. Not completely silent, not the suffocating silence of rule number 2, but wrong. The kind of quiet where birds stay still and even the wind refuses to pass through. Something was waiting out there. I didn't know it yet, but by the end of the day I'd break a rule, and not even the lantern's light would be enough to save me. I needed supplies, food, propane, batteries, anything to make life feel normal. It was colder that day, cold enough that my eyes watered the moment I stepped onto the porch. The well sat crooked under a thin crust of frost, its wooden cover trembling slightly in the breeze like something underneath it was breathing. I tried not to look at it. Wilson whined as I grabbed my keys. I told him he was coming with me, but he refused to move. He planted himself at the threshold, hackles raised, and growled at the tree line. He wasn't growling at me. He was growling at whatever was out there. I crouched beside him, resting a hand on his side, and whispered, "What do you see?" He didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then he turned his head toward me slowly, and I realized something horrible. He didn't want me to leave. Not the property, not the house. He wanted me inside, now. The wind shifted, carrying a cold, damp, metallic smell, like rusted water from deep underground. My breath came out in a trembling fog. Something moved in the woods, not fast, not slow, just deliberate. A shape, or the suggestion of one, tall, thin, watching from behind a tangle of bare oak branches. That was enough. I stepped back inside and locked the door. Wilson relaxed instantly, as though the door blocked out a pressure I couldn't feel. I needed supplies and answers, but before I could think about either, a soft knocking behind me made my heart stop. 3 taps on the opposite wall, just like last night. Wilson lunged at the sound, barking. Rule number 5. If you hear knocking on the walls, it isn't for you. Do not respond. I backed away, hands shaking. The knocking came again, slower this time, and then I heard a voice, my voice, but higher, feminine, almost pleading. "Alan, please, it's dark out here. Let me in." But it wasn't dark. The sun was still up. The voice didn't match the time of day. Wilson snarled so violently he nearly choked, and the voice outside copied the sound perfectly. Whatever was out there was learning. I didn't step back outside until mid-afternoon, when the woods finally made noises that felt normal. Wind in the branches, leaves shifting, a crow calling in the distance. I didn't want to leave, but we needed food. Wilson hated the idea. He stiffened, growled, and even grabbed my jacket sleeve between his teeth when I tried to walk toward the truck. We made it only 10 yards before he stopped dead. He wouldn't cross the property line. He wasn't refusing me, he was refusing the woods. I promised we would stay, and the woods answered in sudden, total silence. It was rule number 2. Wilson dropped into a crouch, tail tucked, whining in terror. I stood still, listening, a creak of branches, a dragging sound like something tall brushing against bark. Then, from deep in the trees, a perfect copy of my voice called out, "Alan, where are you going?" Another voice answered, my grandfather's voice, raspy, old, dead. "Come back inside." Wilson pressed against my legs as both voices began whispering in unison, low and rhythmic, calling my name again and again. They weren't calling me. They were luring me, coaxing me toward the property line, where rule number 9 said I could never go at night. But it wasn't night. The rules weren't protecting me. The woods were bending them. When the silence finally broke and the normal sounds of the forest returned, I sprinted back to the cabin with Wilson in my arms. I didn't remember unlocking the door, just slamming it behind us. My mistake came at sundown. I hadn't meant to break a rule. I didn't even realize I had until it was too late. I was lighting the lantern near the back door when the flame flickered out. I reached for the matches and saw the time on the stove clock, 12:04 a.m. I hadn't realized how late it had gotten. I was outside the bedroom, not asleep, not where I was supposed to be, and I'd broken rule number 1, never go outside after midnight. I wasn't outside the cabin, but I wasn't safe. The knocking started immediately, violent and furious. Fists pounded on every wall at once. Windows rattled, glass bowed inward. Wilson barked until his voice broke. The woods outside went silent again, that suffocating silence that meant something enormous was close. My voice called from outside, and behind it came another, lower, hungry, telling me to open the door. The doorknob twisted. I lunged and slammed my weight against the door as something pushed back hard enough to splinter wood and strain the hinges. A whisper seeped through the cracks, telling me I was already one of them. Then everything stopped. Silence settled thick and waiting. After several unbearably long moments, I backed away and lit the lantern with trembling hands. The moment the flame caught, Wilson whimpered. On the door, pressed into the wood, was a new handprint, smaller, human-sized, perfect, except for the fingers carved too deep, splintering the wood and gouging the grain. In the center of the palm, carved with razor precision, were the words, "You broke a rule." I didn't sleep. Wilson stayed glued to my side as the lantern flickered all night, the flame bending as if something pressed its face against the door from outside, waiting, breathing, smiling. When dawn finally arrived, pale and cold, I stepped onto the porch, the new handprint, the carved warning, and beneath them a crude arrow gouged into the wood, pointing toward the edge of the property, toward the well. Something had invited me, or challenged me, or marked me. I didn't know which was worse, but one thing was certain. The rules weren't enough anymore. The woods wanted me. And after last night, I was starting to think they were going to get me.